Hey everybody, it's Pam at Country Living Newbie Custom Decor in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Today we are going to be putting our second coat of drop cloth on this gorgeous coffee table. Yesterday I went ahead and put my base coat on and it actually covered very, very well. It was a super dark wood, and of course we're doing a pretty light color over it, but I got a good base coat on. I did give it a very light sanding. Actually, I don't even want to call it sanding. It's just more of a smoothing it out using a 400 grit piece of sandpaper, and I really just kind of lightly brushed over it, so now it's nice and smooth. I didn't hit these raised areas here for fear of kind of taking the paint off on the edges, because I had just finished painting it. So I did all the flat surfaces and the bottom. I didn't do the posts on here either. But today we're gonna go ahead and give it our second coat of Dixie Belle's drop cloth. And drop cloth is a very, very pretty white. It's got a slight undertone of beige. Dixie Belle makes a variety of whites. This one is super pretty, as they all are. And eventually we are going to put a clear coat over this, and we'll probably do some glaze. There's lots of pretty details in here to work with, but right now we're concentrating on getting a nice clean coat and streak-free, brushstroke-free base coat on the table. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. And I put my paint onto a paper plate. I don't usually paint out of the jar. I'm not gonna be using this whole container. This is Dixie Belle's 32-ounce container. I'm not going to be using all of it on this table, so I don't like to dip my brush from my piece to my plate back into the jar. I don't want to contaminate the paint. The paint is preservative free, no VOCs, and we just don't want to get any contamination in there. So today I'm going to be using Dixie Belle's Mini. This is a beautiful synthetic brush. They did just come out with an angled one too. This is their flat, but it's got a real nice nice end on it, and the brushes are real pretty. They're pretty red. They hold a lot of paint. They minimize brush strokes. These, I haven't lost a bristle yet using these. They're just great quality brushes. So this is their 2-inch Mini. And of course, I'm going to use my Mr. Bottle, which is over here. I like to paint with a slightly damp brush, so we have this Mr. Bottle. It's a little different than a spray bottle. It just puts a fine mist, and we're going to put that on the brush. You don't need to get the brush wet, but you do want to make it just a little bit damp. It'll help the paint go on a little bit easier and a little bit further. And then when you paint with the end of your brush. So I literally just dipped a little bit and got a little bit of paint on the tip of my brush. I'm not doing it on the sides. And in fact, I hold my brush on the bristles towards the end. That way it kind of keeps me in check with not getting too much paint on my brush, because if I start getting paint up towards where my fingers are, I know I'm probably loading my brush too much. So when we do these really flat surfaces, it's important to not do short brush strokes and stop multiple times. You're going to have to stop multiple times, but you're going to want to go back over it and do a long brush stroke to get those breaks in the paint smoothed out. So we're just going to start laying it on, and I'm not sure, hopefully you can see me doing that. And the second coat is going to go on super smooth because we've sanded it and we've got our base coat on, and I think this is probably the only additional coat we're going to need. Dixie Belle is a wonderfully self-leveling paint, so when you first put it on, it is a mineral chalk paint. It's very thick and highly pigmented. You probably will notice some brush strokes on there. But this paint will level itself out like you will not believe to a super smooth finish. And this mini brush is good for getting your first coat on, and then also these long flat surfaces. So you can already see the difference in the paint. Let's bring you in. But you can see, hopefully you can see, here's my first coat and then the second coat on the flat part. The coverage is amazing. All right, we're gonna keep going. Now some of this coffee table is a little bit of a challenge because it's got these little divots, I guess not divots, but just these little round balls that come out, and there's all these little nooks and crannies in here. So we kind of just have to dab it to fill all that in. And then we're just gonna smooth it out by running our brush lightly over it. We don't want to go heavy. When we bring our brush back, we don't want to take off what we just put on. We really just kind of want to smooth out any of the heavy spots that may have gotten caught up in this detail. We may even have to just take a detail brush when we're done and get in there, because it's, I mean, they're really kind of deep. A lot of times you can get it with a regular brush like this, but in this case, I think we're going to have to go in with something a little bit smaller. But we can do that at the end and just touch up. Again, I'm just kind of dabbing, getting my bristles in there, and then smoothing it over. Because when you dab, you're going to get some clumps and some raised paint on there, and you want a nice smooth finish. So just make sure you smooth your brush over it when you're done. We're going to hit this middle part here. And I forgot this end part. And as the paint is drying, you don't want to be going back over it. Let it dry, and if you're seeing some spots that you missed, you know, let it dry and lightly sand it, and then go back over it. But as the paint's drying, you don't want to put your brush back over it, especially if you're spritzing your brush and putting it back over. The water is going to reactivate the paint that's already on there, and you're going to start taking paint off. So you don't want to take paint off that you just put on, right? Okay. So we're going to finish these little divots down here. I know these are called something, I'm not sure what. That would be my husband Bill, that'd be a good question for him. Just kind of like a little trim piece on there. And then we're going to hit that middle part, smooth it over. I'm lightly going over the spot that I already painted. I'm barely even touching the surface here. But I just want to get one smooth line all the way across. And then watch your edges, because as you kind of go around the corner, you don't want the paint to build on your edges. I think that is looking pretty good. Now the challenge on this are these, I guess, spindles or posts. They are really, when you get in here, it's almost like you have to be a contortionist to get in there. But they do give this piece some real character. Part of the back of my head. And I usually, for spindles, I take the side of my brush and I just go back and forth. And this is true for spindles on a chair or these big posts like this. And then I take the flat part and just smooth it out. And I haven't needed to re-wet my brush. The paint's still going on very smooth. After you've used the paint a few times and the different brushes, you'll get a feel for when you want to spritz your brush again. You'll kind of feel it dragging a little bit, but right now we're doing pretty good, so just going to keep going. And you can see how little I've loaded my brush. The paint goes very far. Just when you think, you know, there's nothing left in your brush, you get some more. This is the part that's kind of tricky. Luckily, I got a good base coat on, so if I'm having trouble with the spot in here, I'm not too worried about it because the base coat is really going to take care of it. Again, I'm just lightly going over this with the flat part of my brush to keep my brush strokes even. So if you haven't tried Dixie Belle before, I highly recommend giving it a try. I think you will be very happy with, first of all, the choice of colors, which there's 64 colors. That's more colors than any mineral chalk paint line out there. Not to mention the endless color recipe possibilities. And there's actually a color chart out there of different color recipes just so you can see what they look like, and they are 50-50 mix of 2 different colors. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my mister bottle because I do feel like my brush is getting a little bit dry, and I'm not soaking it, I'm just misting it and then running my brush through the mist. And then when I dip it back in, my paint, you can see, I'm not using a lot of paint. I mean, really, that's all I've used. So you don't need to, you know, really load your brush up heavy. So getting back to Dixie Belle's line, 64 colors. You know, obviously, it's a water-based paint. It's thick paint, it's highly pigmented, and it blends beautifully. So not only can you mix the colors, but they blend together. So if you're doing a blended piece, it's very good for that. Also, all their products that go along with the paint, so their waxes, their glazes, they are also water-based. So you can mix paint with their wax to create any color wax you want. It already comes in 5 colors, well, 4 colors and then clear. But if you want red wax, you can mix your red paint with your clear wax, and you have red wax. And the wax is last rule doesn't apply here. You can clear coat with their liquid clear coat and then wax over it if you want, or vice versa. You can wax and then put their clear coat over that as well. That's the beauty of their products all being water-based and all working together. So there's a couple spots back here that I'm going to come back and hit, but I think we're looking pretty good there. We're going to go across the bottom. I mean, there's just no way of saying that doing spindles or posts like this is fun, but it's what makes pieces really, really, really pretty. So it's worth the effort. It's worth the effort. frayed a little bit down here. So I'm just smoothing those out because there's a couple raised dots of paint, and you do not want that. And I'm not pressing hard, very lightly, just to smooth them out. Again, I don't want to take off all my paint. I just want to smooth out the rough spots. And I feel my brush dragging just a little bit again. Much better. And this brush isn't shedding, but every now and then I see like a little hair, but not a bristle, but just a little hair that probably came off my clothes because I have 2 dogs and 2 cats, and I always have hair on me. And for no particular reason, I'm going to just work from the bottom up this time instead of from the top to the bottom. Again, you can kind of see how I'm just going back and forth and I'm lightly going across. I want to make sure that I don't get a buildup or a line of paint on the edge here, because I'm going to eventually be painting across, but I'm just kind of smoothing out where I stop painting this little edge, right? Because I don't want it to be raised when I do the flat part. So as you're painting, you gotta kind of watch for those things. You know, watch for drifts always. If you ended up putting a little bit too much paint on your brush, because it's a lot easier to clean it up as you go than have to kind of go back over your whole piece and, you know, sand drips down and repaint. So just kind of watch it from all angles as you're going. And sometimes you got to even lay on the floor and look at it from that perspective. And again, these spots right down here where I can't really bend my bristles, and then like up top, they are a little bit of a challenge. You really got to try to get in there. Just got to sometimes play with different brushes and different angles. Sometimes you get lucky and it's not really a spot that is going to be seen. Go ahead and spray again. There is a little bit of damage to this piece, and it's not even, you know, it's not structural, or it's not a sturdy piece, but like on the top, the reason I didn't leave the top just plain. I started painting the bottom down, and I left the top because the top was such a pretty dark wood, but there were some, there's a few nicks in it, just a few imperfections, and I decided to go ahead and paint the whole thing. And there's some damage here, but honestly, it kind of makes it look cool once you get the paint over it. So sometimes you just have to decide if you're going to do the repairs, or you're going to leave it as is and just let come through as character, right? Turn this a little bit. There we go. This piece was so big, I have it on a couple tables that are angled out to shape like a V so I can get in the middle, which is what we're going to do right now. We are really getting good coverage with this second coat, so I'm pretty sure, other than a few probably minor spots that I'm going to have to touch up, we're not going to need a third coat on this. So that says a lot about the coverage that Dixie Belle provides, because this was a very dark piece. And again, painting over it white, you know, sometimes if you want full coverage, you have to hit it with another coat, but not on this one. I think a lot of people are surprised. I know when we do our paint classes, the first coat, sometimes you'll get it on and it doesn't look like it's covering real well. And that's just with some colors and depending what surface you're painting on. So like this, I wasn't happy with the first coat. You can see a lot of the wood coming through, and that's just not the look that I was going for. But when you get your second coat on, the coverage is crazy good, crazy good. Sorry for the back of my head. And I will end up flipping this whole table over. I will end up flipping this whole table over and getting underneath some spots because it's just really hard at this angle to see everything. Like I have to put my head in here. And if you're painting furniture for yourself, and you know that the spots you missed or some things underneath won't be seen, then you don't have to worry about them. But a lot of times when you're painting furniture to sell or commission, you know, you really want to take the extra time and cover all those spots. You went a little heavy there. So the next part we're going to do is this piece up here, and let me bring you in a little bit so you can see. You can see the little the lines in there. So that's always a challenge because we're going to end up going across the piece this way, but then having to come down to fill in these gaps. So again, kind of like we did with these little divots here, you want to get your paint in there, but then lightly, very lightly, go over it with a clean stroke, because we're going to be going kind of in different ways here. And if you want to get the most brush stroke free finish, you should try to keep your paintbrush going in the same direction. So the first thing we're going to do, and as I'm going across, I'm going to wipe the top, because again, I don't want this strip of paint going across the flat top, because that'll make it a little harder for me to get a smooth finish across the top when I'm ready to do that. So now I'm just going down to fill these cracks And then I'm taking my brush and just lightly smoothing it out. I think I'm going to go all the way across the top and kind of get that done. Some pieces really take a strategy, and you'll kind of figure that out as you go. You know, where to start, where to finish. And sometimes I don't always figure that out right away. Like by the time you get to your fourth leg, you've got it all figured out, and then you're done. Okay, laying it on here, just getting it in all those spots, and then lightly going across. And if I went heavy going across, I would take off what I just put on. So just, again, barely any pressure, just to smooth out the brush strokes. So the Mini is very versatile. You can see all the different kinds of surfaces that I've painted with it. Some flat ones, some round ones, some with detail. So a lot of it is in just getting a good brush and knowing how to use the angles on the brush. And I'm not going to go back over that now because it's starting to dry, and I don't want to take off what I put on. So I think this whole side is done. What we'll do is we will come back. I'm going to finish off the whole piece. Actually, before we go, let's do some of the top. I know these flat surfaces create a challenge sometimes, and I want to show you what it looks like right now, if you can see it or not. Let's see if I can get a good angle here. So you can see the first coat that I laid on. So you can kind of see that dark wood coming through. Again, I lightly sanded this. I even hesitate to call it sanding because it's really just running the paper over it to smooth it out. I'm going to get a little more paint on my paper plate here. I'm going to use the same brush for the top. Now when you do the top, the edges, you want to go out to the edges, because if you come in this way over the lip here, you're going to get a big buildup of paint, whereas if you just go from the middle outward and just make sure you get that edge, you're going to have a nice clean edge. If you go this way, all that paint on your brush is going to come off on that edge, and you're going to be going back over and cleaning that up. So again, I'm going to dampen my brush. And this is a long coffee table. So we're obviously not going to get across it in one stroke. So we're going to do multiple strokes, but as we go, we're going to smooth back where our paintbrush stopped. We want to try to get as continuous of a stroke as we can. Got some little dust bunnies up here. Get rid of those. All right. So again, just a little bit on my brush, and you can see I started from the inside, and I'm just going out. That doesn't build up any paint on this little lip here. Okay, and then you can start going back and forth. And I'm turning the brush on its edge when I get real close to this edge here, just so I can make sure I get the whole edge. And as I'm going, I'm just repeating where I painted. Trying to get those long strokes. Dixie Belle paint dries very quickly, of course, depending on your climate. So you want to make sure that it's still just, you know, it's not drying too much as you go back over it to clean up your brush strokes. I know you probably can't see me too well down here. Way down here. And again, at the end, I'm going from the inside out. And then I'm just going to do a long stroke. So now I don't see any spots where I stopped. I'm going to go on to the next one. I'm going to overlap just a little bit, going from the inside out again. You want to, see, I keep hitting that, going too far. And I do feel my brush dragging a little bit, so I'm gonna put a little more mister on there. And we're overlapping just a little bit over that last section. And it's starting to dry, so I don't want to be painting over the whole thing, right? Because I don't want to start taking off that paint, especially with my damp brush, because that water will reactivate. When I go back over to smooth it out, I am barely putting any pressure on my brush. And I'm getting towards the end here. So this is where I want to, from the inside, work outward to that edge. And then very lightly, and I'm doing it a little bit on the first row, but barely touching it, barely touching it. I mean, this is just almost dry to the touch already, this first row. So, I don't know, let's see if this will work or not, I'm not sure. Bring you down. There we go. So let's start you on the edge here. Okay, so I have, again, very little paint on the edge of my brush, starting from the inside, slightly overlapping, and then we can start going back and forth. Long strokes. I'm going back over the last row very lightly. Very lightly. Long strokes back over. And now that I'm at the end, what are we going to do? We're going to go from the inside out. And then very lightly all the way across. And don't get discouraged when, if you've painted a wall before, you know, like as you start painting and the paint starts drying, you start going, oh, like the coverage doesn't look good, it looks uneven. And obviously that's because half the paint is dry, half the paint is wet. It's in all stages of the drying process. So like right now, when I look at this, I see some raised areas, some dry areas, some really wet areas. But once it all dries and it does its magical self-leveling, it's gonna look a whole lot better. So, you know, don't try not to get hung up on the process. I mean, you have to be careful. You have to, you know, go in one direction. Don't move your brush all over. Just keep your process consistent. Kind of cleaning up as you go, and then when the whole piece is done and it's dried and it's leveled, it's going to be beautiful. So I hope this video has helped you at least learn a little bit about Dixie Belle Paint and its amazing qualities. Also about their great little mini brush. They make lots of different synthetic brushes, ovals, flats, minis, and they're all wonderful. So it just kind of depends, you know, what feels good in your hand, what type of piece that you're painting. But having the right brush is super important, especially to get that nice brush stroke free finish if that's what you're going for. So if you like this video, give me a like or a wow, and you can always subscribe to my channel, of course. We're going to be doing more and more videos like this. So this is, we're just getting started. So it's Country Living Newbie. We're located in Spring Hill, Tennessee. It's a little bit south of Nashville, about 40 miles south. So it's beautiful country out here, and we have a beautiful little shop. So if you're ever in the area, come by and see us and tell a friend. All right, everybody, take care.